The world was aflame. World War II roared from the bombed-out streets of London to the embattled sands of North Africa. It demanded an unprecedented mobilization of human will and resources. On the American home front, the call for service echoed. It reached into every corner of society, even those traditionally barred from the battlefield. In 1942, the establishment of the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, or WAAC, cracked open a door. It invited women to step beyond the confines of civilian life. They could now contribute to the war effort. For many black women, this invitation resonated with a particular urgency. Charity Adams grew up in Columbia, South Carolina. She knew the sharp edges of a segregated world from an early age. From her second-story porch, she witnessed a chilling spectacle. It was a Ku Klux Klan parade. This was a visceral early lesson in the bigotry that defined her society. Her parents were resolute in their dignity. They taught her self-worth and intellectual ambition. Yet she saw the daily indignities. White individuals addressed black adults as uncle or auntie. They denied them honorifics. She knew the long walks to segregated schools. She knew the unspoken rules that governed every interaction. Civilian life, even with her intellect, offered limited horizons. She pursued mathematics and physics at Wilberforce University. Then she studied vocational psychology for her master's degree. The prospect of teaching felt dull and rigid. It was a path too narrow for her ambition. She understood the unspoken decree of her time. Black individuals had to be twice as qualified as their white counterparts for equivalent jobs. This relentless pressure fueled a desire for a more challenging, less certain path. Dean Teal of Wilberforce University presented the WAAC invitation. It emphasized career and leadership opportunities. For Charity, it clicked into place. This was her chance to break free. Her application was mailed. Then the interview came. A committee of distinguished white women and a colonel sat before her. "Can you lead 10,000 women overseas and feed them without other officers?" she was asked. Her response was unwavering. It was delivered with a confidence she would later regret as cocky. "If any other woman can, given the same training and opportunity, I can," she stated. A whispered comment followed. "Let's take her and see if she is as good as she thinks she is." The telegram arrived around July 1942. It demanded she report to Atlanta the next morning. It was a rapid, life-altering decision. On July 13, 1942, at Fort Hays, she was sworn into the WAAC. She was the only black recruit among 8 that morning. She was assigned serial number A500001. This was the very first from the 5th Service Command. The process, including a thorough physical examination, left her physically and emotionally exhausted. But the exhilaration of a new beginning was palpable. It was tinged with the pain of separation from home. Leaving Wilberforce had been exciting and scary. It was a culture shock that had prepared her for this next leap. Just 5 days later, on July 18, 1942, Charity Adams boarded a train. She was now an auxiliary. The train at Fort Hays was bound for Des Moines, Iowa. She was one of 5 black women in the Ohio contingent. For a brief, deceptive stretch, the journey offered a sense of camaraderie. But the pervasive segregation of the era was never far. The colored coach seats were relegated to the back half of the second baggage car. They were separated from the white coach by a mere string. It was a fragile, yet potent, symbol of division. During a frantic stop in Knoxville, the train was about to pull away. A compassionate conductor allowed her a last-minute phone call home. It was a small act of grace in a journey defined by larger societal strictures. Any illusion of integration vanished the moment she arrived at Fort Des Moines. This was on July 19-2. It was a dreary, rainy day. Despite the post's initial beauty, a recruiting officer's voice cut through the air. "Will all the colored girls move over on this side?" he commanded. It was a stark, defining moment of systemic discrimination. They were herded into a separate group. They were then bounced and jostled in the back of a truck. This symbolized the messy reality they were entering. They were deposited at a reception center in a stable building. It was an alley where we stood, hidden from view by high walls. They were assigned to quarters 54, their own segregated building. Their first meal was in the consolidated mess hall on Stable Row. It was a yellow building with steam tables. Cameras flashed. Reporters hovered. each recruit felt like a minor celebrity under intense scrutiny. But the message was clear. The army, despite its need for their service, was not a place of complete equality. Race dictated initial placement and treatment. This rigid segregation debunked any myth of military meritocracy. Yet, it inadvertently created a path for black women to lead. Charity Adams Early was commissioned as the first black woman officer. She was a testament to this. The Army's policy led to the formation of all black platoons. The 3rd Platoon, 1st Company, was comprised of 39 African American women. They would quickly forge close bonds. They became a vital family group for mutual support. The first all-black company was Company 12. It was later Company 14, then Company 8. It was activated in an unfinished boomtown area. This was a raw testament to the Army's simultaneous need and reluctance. With the first black officers commissioned and the initial companies formed, officer candidate training began. It was rigorous and often chaotic. This was in the summer of 1942. This was uncharted territory. It was a 6-week crucible that would establish foundational traditions for women in the U.S. Army. These women were the guinea pigs. They navigated constantly evolving training structures, regulations, and expectations. Confusion was a daily companion. Rules were tried out, changed, then sometimes changed back. Life was a relentless cycle of activity. Reveille was at 6:30 a.m. Classes ran from 8 to 4:30. Then came evening duties. Lights out was at 9, bed check was at 11. It was a constant process of falling in, forward marching, falling out, and class dismissed. This went on from morning until night. It was often punctuated by a mad dash between barracks. The Iowa weather was unsparing. It shifted from dry, dusty, and sticky to rainy, muddy, and sticky. This left uniforms soggy and damp. Charity, like many, often found herself wet so often and so long. Learning to make a bed to military standards was an early, stubborn challenge. This was the white bed with its specific fold depths and mitered corners. Policing an area was also challenging. It meant meticulous cleaning, picking up every discernible bit of trash. Meticulous preparation was often foiled by inspectors. They nearly always managed to discover one undusted spot. Adapting male-centric infantry drill regulations to women wearing skirts proved comically difficult. Instructions like thumbs along the seams of the trousers were impractical. Shorter women struggled to keep pace with the military band's cadence. This created a humorous spectacle on the parade ground. Charity herself initially struggled to project her command voice. She improvised a swing on around the circle, march during a drill. This drew a sarcastic correction from Lieutenant Mabry. It highlighted the evolving nature of drill for women. The rigorous training was not just physical. An arduous Army General Classification Test, or AGCT, was taken in pouring rain. Recruits had sore arms from vaccinations. It was initially dismissed as unimportant. Only later was it revealed to be critical for officer candidate school eligibility. It required a minimum score of 90. Charity, despite her mathematics background, even found map reading an unexpected dark alley of difficulty. She eventually mastered it. The tripodist became a frequent welcome visitor. They tended to aching feet. These were the challenges that forged the first generation of WAAC officers. This group of women faced the dual burdens of gender and racial prejudice. They were determined to prove their worth. They aspired for roles far beyond the Negro jobs traditionally available. They were laying the groundwork for a truly integrated military. The 6-week crucible of officer candidate training at Fort Des Moines culminated in a formal graduation ceremony. This was on August 28, 1942. On that hot, beautiful day, the first cohort of women transitioned. This included Charity Adams and her black colleagues. They went from guinea pigs to commissioned third officers. This was more than a change in rank. It was a profound shift in responsibility. No longer merely adapting to military life, they were now charged with defining it for others. Charity reflected on the path ahead. She understood the weight of her new role. "I knew that there was no such thing as separate but equal," she stated. "But I had become determined to see that any troops I commanded would have every opportunity that was afforded others. This conviction would guide her as she stepped into the challenging role of trainer. She was tasked with activating new basic training companies. These were often in unfinished boomtown areas, rife with construction grime and gummy mud. The early days of the WAAC were a period of intense learning. This was not just for the recruits, but for the fledgling female command structure itself. Male officers initially served as tactical advisors. They gradually ceded leadership roles to the newly commissioned WAAC officers. Charity recalled working with figures like the shy First Lieutenant Young. She also worked with the talkative gun collector Lieutenant Crowley and the balanced Lieutenant Wright. All contributed to her on-the-job education. It was a time of learning by doing. The officers quickly grasped that there was no such thing as personal success. Success came only if we all succeeded together. This collective spirit was born from shared challenges. It solidified their understanding of the real purpose to the core. This purpose extended beyond individual achievement. It included the success and dignity of all the women under their command. Life at Fort Des Moines, even for officers, was a study in contrasts. The looming shadow of the global war often brought blackouts and despair. News from distant battlefields filtered through. It was a constant, low hum of anxiety. Yet, amidst the rigorous discipline and pervasive segregation, moments of unexpected camaraderie and joy emerged. The social sad sacks found solace in their shared quarters in Quarters 1. A home-like atmosphere sometimes led to officers like Charity and Lieutenant Mary Lewis preparing meals. They used produce from a victory garden. Its crooked rows were a testament to their resilience. A baby grand piano was a gift to Negro officers. It offered a small, symbolic victory against segregated facilities. It provided a space for music and connection. There were even rare officers' parties and romance. These were carefully orchestrated double dates and friendships. They hinted at a nascent sense of community. It flourished despite the daily grind and the constant scrutiny. Each recruit often felt like a minor celebrity. While the women of the WAAC fought a war overseas, they simultaneously engaged in a double war on the home front. This was a fight against systemic racism. The pervasive injustice of Jim Crow America frequently infiltrated their military experience. There was a powerful incident on the Carolina Special Train. A white Southern lieutenant witnessed a black WAAC captain denied service in the dining car. He boldly intervened. He shamed the steward into compliance. This was a rare, public act of interracial solidarity. This defiance, though isolated, implicitly debunked the myth of universal white support for segregation. The fight for justice extended beyond individual acts. The Negro Ministerial Alliance and the NAACP relentlessly pressured the military. Led by figures like Charity's father, they addressed the mistreatment of black soldiers. This was particularly at places like Fort Jackson. Their organized resistance eventually led to a crucial step. It was the arming of Negro military police. This was a significant move towards equality and safety for black servicemen. But the struggle was not without its dangers. The terrifying shadow of the Ku Klux Klan loomed. This was evidenced by their intimidation tactics. They surrounded the homes of black officers and community leaders. It was a chilling reminder of the ever-present threat of racial violence. This was against those who dared to challenge the status quo. Throughout these challenges, Charity Adams's leadership and moral compass were consistently tested and strengthened. She took principled stands. One was her courageous refusal to command a proposed segregated Negro training regiment. She understood that a separate but equal plan represented a low ceiling for advancement. It was inherently unjust. She defied the order, despite the professional repercussions and the isolation it brought. This unwavering opposition challenged the very notion that the WAAC was a fully integrated environment. Her assertiveness was also evident in her daily command. When a major demanded cleanliness in the boiler room, Charity was initially afraid. She decisively threw the fireman's belongings out. She surprised herself with this bold act of authority. Similarly, she handled an insubordinate private who refused to get out of bed. She chose to confine her with a guard rather than calling the military police. She transformed defiance into an enforced rest. These incidents solidified her ability to enforce discipline and maintain order. They revealed a commander who was both firm and innovative. Her influence continued to rise. This culminated in her promotion to major on September 20, 1943. This personal advancement was swiftly followed by a temporary duty assignment to Washington, D.C. During her first visit to the immense and labyrinthine Pentagon, she advocated for increased motor transport training quotas for Negro women. Navigating the sprawling building was an experience humorously likened to a baby being commissioned before its mother found her office. She directly challenged systemic limitations. She debunked the idea that women, particularly black women, were solely relegated to support roles. They possessed leadership capacity and specialized skills. The European theatre of operations, a vast, churning maw of war, demanded bodies. As the conflict raged, the call for personnel grew increasingly desperate. It reached even into the segregated ranks of the Women's Army Corps. For African American WAACs, the previous luxury of voluntary overseas duty evaporated. The need was too great, the demand was too urgent. Their service, once an option, became a conditional imperative. It was a stark reflection of a military that would accept their sacrifice. But it still struggled with their equality. Major Charity Adams and her fellow officers, along with hundreds of enlisted women, had undergone rigorous preparation. This was at Fort Oglethorpe. It was a crucible designed to hone their military skills and harden them for the unknown. They faced the constant, gnawing presence of racial prejudice. This was even as they prepared to fight for a nation that denied them full dignity. These were the twin burdens of their service. The looming threat of an external enemy was one. The persistent internal battle against discrimination was the other. The journey across the Atlantic was a testament to the psychological toll of wartime service. It was a cycle of intense activity followed by stretches of unbearable boredom. Days blurred into a monotonous rhythm of waiting. There was uncertainty. There was the constant drone of engines, the physical discomfort of cargo planes, the cramped spaces, and the basic meals of jam or bologna were compounded. They were compounded by the mental fatigue of perpetual vigilance. This was not the glamorous adventure portrayed in newsreels. It was a grueling test of endurance. It was interspersed with the profound ache of separation from home. Each woman carried the weight of her personal anxieties. There was the quiet dread of the unknown. There was the maddening hunger for news from loved ones. The vast, indifferent ocean stretched before them. It was a liquid mirror reflecting their isolation. It made every minute feel like an hour. It made every hour a day. Finally, after zigzagging across the Atlantic, the first contingent of African American WAAC officers and enlisted women arrived. They had stops in the Azores and Scotland. Their destination was the European theatre. Their presence, particularly in uniform, sparked overt curiosity and disbelief among personnel at every stop. They were a sight few had ever witnessed. They were a challenge to ingrained perceptions. Cold, hungry, and exhausted, they reported to various headquarters. They then received their critical assignment, Birmingham, England. Their mission was clear and vital. It was to tackle the overwhelming backlog of mail. Upon arrival, the challenges of being foreigners in a war-torn land became immediately apparent. Initial housing often lacked basic comforts. Navigating the nuances of a new currency and culture led to minor but frustrating misunderstandings. Formal orders for the 6,888th Central Postal Directory Battalion were still delayed. Major Adams recognized the urgent need for immediate structure and leadership. On March 2, 1945, she asserted her authority. She issued General Order No. 1, officially assuming command. It was a decisive act. It was a declaration of intent to bring order to chaos, even as the bureaucratic machinery lagged behind. The task awaiting the 6,888 was monumental. Millions of pieces of undeliverable mail sat in massive warehouses. These were letters, packages, the very lifelines connecting soldiers to their families. It was a silent testament to the war's disruption. No mail, low morale, was the unofficial motto of the front lines. The 6,888 understood the profound psychological impact their work would have. Their efficiency was unparalleled. Their meticulous system for processing and redirecting mail quickly earned them a reputation. Lieutenant General John C. H. Lee, Commanding General of the Communications Zone, European Theatre of Operations, personally reviewed the unit. He witnessed their competence and professionalism firsthand. Their immediate assignment to such a vital logistical function and their subsequent record-breaking efficiency implicitly debunked a myth. It was the myth that African American women were not capable of or suited for demanding overseas military service. In a theatre of war where every resource was critical, the 6,888 did not just meet expectations, they shattered them. They proved their worth not with rhetoric, but with relentless, indispensable service. The 6,888 Central Postal Directory Battalion was a unit forged in necessity. It was defined by defiance. Their mission was to clear the overwhelming mail backlog for millions of American troops. It was a logistical Everest, but their daily reality was a constant climb against more than just mountains of letters. It was a battle against bureaucratic inertia. It was a battle against the grinding monotony of endless shifts. It was a battle against the insidious creep of racial prejudice. Amidst the cycle of stress and shared miseries of their relentless work, the women of the 6,888th understood. Morale was not a luxury, it was a strategic imperative. Major Charity Adams recognized this keenly. How could we keep morale up if the women did not feel that they could look their best, she wondered. From this insight, a functional beauty salon was ingeniously established. It was a vibrant oasis in the heart of their bustling operations. It was not just about appearance. It became a vital community hub. It was a place where the women and even visiting nurses and Red Cross workers could find a moment of normalcy. They could get their hair done just like back home. This resourceful act quietly challenged the narrow military view. It was that morale was solely a product of combat performance. For these women, dignity and self-care were just as crucial. Major Adams's leadership was a beacon of uncompromising resolve. She had already asserted the unit's operational integrity in a tense confrontation over a returned letter. She refused to compromise on protocol. But her most public stand came in Birmingham. A general, dismissive of her authority, declared he would send a white first lieutenant down here to show you how to run this unit. Adams's response was immediate, unyielding, and etched into history. "Over my dead body, sir," she stated. It was more than a retort. It was a declaration of war against the racial hierarchy that sought to diminish her and her troops. The charges that followed were strategically countered. This demonstrated that black women in the military were not passive recipients of discrimination. They were active, intelligent resistors capable of influencing their environment. This spirit of collective defiance resonated throughout the battalion. The Red Cross, in a stark reminder of Jim Crow's reach, attempted to establish a segregated hotel for black WAACs in Rouen. Major Adams's stance was unequivocal. "I promise you that, as God is my witness, as long as I am commanding officer of the 6,1888th Central Postal Directory Battalion, not one member of that unit will ever spend one night here," she declared. The women of the 6,1888 were united in their self-respect. They collectively supported her decision. This proved that their strength was not just in their numbers. It was in their unwavering solidarity. As Adams herself would later reflect, "Oh no, I had lots of trouble with you." This was a wry summary of her ongoing struggle against institutionalized discrimination. The work itself was a blur of motion. Day and night, the women processed millions of pieces of mail. It was a constant battle against the 6 airplane hangars of Christmas packages. It was a battle against the emotional weight of no mail, low morale. Yet, even amidst this vital work, they faced a different kind of assault. It was the insidious whispers and outright slurs of racial prejudice. The absurd tales rumor was a particularly demeaning example. It claimed black WAACs had physical tails that necessitated their curfew. But the women, with Adams's ingenious support, met these slurs with quiet dignity and visible proof. They appeared in public in skirts to debunk the ridiculous claim. These moments of solidarity were born from shared miseries and a common purpose. They were a constant testament to their resilience. They transformed daily indignities into acts of collective strength. As the war in Europe drew to its cataclysmic close, the 6,888th continued its vital work. They adapted to new locations and the shifting landscape of a world in transition. From the UK, the unit moved to Rouen, then on to Paris. Each transition was a logistical puzzle. Each new base was a fresh challenge. Major Adams herself experienced the overwhelming outpouring of French relief on VE Day in Paris. She stepped into streets crammed with people celebrating with victory hysteria. It was a chaotic, yet joyous scene of liberation. Even a shoestring could be lost in the jubilant throngs. Later, the unit's harrowing 70-mile convoy journey from Rouen to Paris underscored persistent dangers. They were enveloped in dense fog so thick it was like pea soup. This was wartime travel, even as hostilities wound down. But the joy of victory was quickly tempered by uncertainty. President Roosevelt's death was relayed to Major Adams through a telephone friendship with an overseas operator. It sent a ripple of anxiety through black troops across the European theatre of operations. Would their contributions be forgotten? Would they be left behind while white personnel were repatriated? It was a stark reminder of the precariousness of their gains. It was a quiet fear that the fight for racial equality might be abandoned without its staunchest advocate. Indeed, the end of the war in Europe brought relief. It also allowed the pre-war enemy of racial and gender discrimination to resurface with renewed vigor. The male ego was awake and active. The fight for equality, once overshadowed by the external enemy, now demanded full attention. When requests for firearms for WAAC military police were denied, the 6,888 adapted. They showed characteristic ingenuity. They established jiu-jitsu training for its military police. One of them famously tackled a much larger man. When the unit's classification was corrected from hospital rations to standard military fare, they responded with resourcefulness. This primarily consisted of large olive-drab cans of powdered eggs. They developed a clever barter system. They exchanged damaged goods from their post-exchange for fresh produce from local farmers. This ensured their nutritional needs were met. These acts of resilience and adaptation were born from necessity. They further challenged the notion that the war's end immediately erased prejudice. For the women of the 6,888, the struggle for dignity and equality continued. It was a relentless battle waged not on distant front lines, but in the heart of a changing world. The war was over. But the journey home for the 6,888 Central Postal Directory Battalion was not a simple return to peace. It was a passage fraught with lingering prejudice. It was a stark reminder that the battle for dignity continued even as the fighting ceased. The return voyage across the Atlantic was aboard a converted German royal yacht. It was crammed with 6,000 military personnel. It offered a final, unflinching demonstration of the racial hierarchy that persisted within the armed forces. Amidst the triple-decked bunks and the incessant clamour of dice games, a group of white nurses confronted the major. They asserted their racial disdain. They demanded a white officer lead them home. Charity Adams, as the senior female officer, stood her ground. Her resolve was unwavering. She was supported by the ship's captain, who upheld military regulations over racial bias. Her firm ultimatum left no room for retreat. "If you cannot go home under my command, I suggest you pack your belongings and disembark quickly," she stated. No one disembarked. It was a powerful public victory against ingrained prejudice. It was a testament to her leadership and the military's own slow, grudging adherence to its rules. Yet the harrowing storm battered the ship for 48 hours. It rolled 5 degrees beyond its capsize point. This was perhaps a more fitting metaphor for the turbulent civilian world that awaited them. Arriving in New York, the sight of the Statue of Liberty stirred diverse hopes. But for Charity, it also symbolized a return to bigotry. Her promotion to lieutenant colonel, effective just before her discharge, was a recognition of her exceptional service, yet it did little to smooth the rough edges of reintegration. The transition from commanding nearly 1,000 women in a war zone to civilian life was jarring. The absence of command and responsibility left a void. It was a feeling of what next. The lingering prejudice was palpable. On a train, a young Negro corporal observed her rank. "If she is strong enough to hold up those silver oak leaves, I guess she is strong enough to put her suitcase up on that rack," he remarked. It was a barbed comment that underscored the societal struggle to accept women in positions of authority. This was particularly true for black women. Returning to graduate school, Charity found ironic reassurance in a philosophy professor's comment. "Nothing has changed," he said. "While you were away fighting to save democracy, we kept education just as it was." It meant she could catch up, but it also highlighted the static nature of a society she had fought to change. Even in her post-war career, she sometimes felt pressure, whether reviewing GI Bill benefits at the Veterans Administration or managing the Miller Academy of Fine Arts. She felt she had to lessen her appearance of independence. She had to become the dependent and helpless person that everyone expected. It was a subtle but constant battle against stereotypes. The legendary spider incident at the Veterans Administration perfectly encapsulated her underlying strength. She feigned helplessness, only to retort, "We did not have spiders in the army. I am sorry to say that we had lots of jerks, and I knew how to handle them." She refused to be diminished. The experiences of the 6,888 profoundly shaped Charity Adams Early and her unit. This ranged from cultural immersion in Europe to navigating complex social dynamics and outright discrimination. Her prayer in Rouen revealed the immense personal cost of her leadership. "Lord, if you let me do a good job as commanding officer of this group of women, I promise that I will never again take a job which involves only women," she prayed. Yet it was through these trials that resilience, dignity, and a profound sense of duty were forged. This contributed to her personal development and lifelong commitment to social progress. This included extensive community work in human services, education, and civic affairs. The general who once threatened her with court-martial later admitted, "Working with you has been quite an education for me, especially about Negroes. You outsmarted me, and I am proud that I know you." This was the transformative power of their service. The story of Charity Adams Early in the 6,1888 Central Postal Directory Battalion represents a crucial, often overlooked contribution to military history. It is also a contribution to the broader struggle for civil rights. Her memoir, written with unblinking candor, serves as a vital historical record. It preserves the experiences of these women for future generations. It contributes to a more complete understanding of the diverse contributions to the war effort. Their service challenged existing racial and gender stereotypes. They demonstrated unparalleled competence and professionalism in a male-dominated and racially segregated military. They laid groundwork for future generations of women and minorities in the military and beyond. Their story stands as a powerful tribute to all women who served. It emphasizes their sacrifices and contributions despite facing multiple forms of discrimination. It explicitly debunks the myth that black women were not capable or willing to serve in significant military capacities during World War II. Their legacy is a testament to the fact that true integration requires not only legal desegregation, but also fundamental attitudinal changes. It was a fight they bravely advanced. One piece of mail, one defiant stand, and one life at a time.